Welcome to this evening's session. I'm so glad to be in conversation with you guys. We're also joined by our sibling Tulomanko online. And this evening we are speaking about queer young feminist activism and organizing. And I think it's important for us to remember just to be in conversation. This is not a panel. We are not about that life. Um, and so, yeah, just share experiences. We all know each other in different ways. So I'm really glad to have you with me. Um, yeah, I think just for disclaimers and backgrounds for technical, if we do experience any technical difficulties, our team that is running the Zoom will try and sort that out as soon as possible. Questions will be taken closer to the end of the session. We will start with a screening of Phefumla Queer Collective, the Phefumla Queer Collective. And then we'll have jump straight into the conversation. And then from there, we can engage with our people online. All good? Okay. So, let's introduce ourselves. Who are we? Where are we from?
Okay, so I'm Monique Mario, and I'm from Cape Town. I'm from all around. People are people. So, but my activism primarily takes place on the Cape Coast.
Nice to meet you. Divine Lisa Moya, also located in Khayelitsha, and a young activist and feminist, also queer. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, you also all know me. My name is Ina Scallard. I'm a queer feminist activist who organizes in different spaces. QFFF is one of those spaces. I was born and bred on the Cape Flats. My organizing takes place largely on the Cape Flats. And now we introduce yourselves for the peoples. Tulo, are you able to hear us? Okay. It seems that we are having some technical difficulties with one of our panelists. Could we maybe just ask them what's happening? Also, hey Sam, thanks for joining us. We see there's quite a few participants. Thank you so much for tuning in and pulling through. Maybe that's Tulo.
That would be nice.
People, can you hear me?
Manko, I think maybe we could start. And I think a good place to start maybe is, what does queerness mean for us? So, yeah, this is the
I was going to ask, should I start?
yeah,
Queerness means being myself. I'm not, it's not something that I actually have a definition. It's just being myself and being loud and being able to be myself any day, anytime, anyhow as well. So it's being able to be myself just that and being seen in that as well. Also seeing myself mostly. So, and it changes with time as well. So it changes with who I am at any day. It's open to change any day because that's who I am. I'm not just one person that I am a few minutes ago, and I get that as well. So my queerness is also around that. It's changing with me as well. It's just being me any day and very loud at it. Yeah, that's what it means to me.
I made a few diary entries last night because I'm like, this is something I'm always thinking about sharing, but I wanted to make it as personal as possible because queerness and the personal is political, like goes together for me. So queerness is not just a state of mind, it's a state of being for me personally. And it's also the embodiment of, manifesting like boundary breaking ideals and embracing also those out of the box way of life. So it's not something like when I was born, it came naturally because I was within that box. And so queerness for me is about expansion, it's about stretching, and also it's about reaching your fullest potential. So it's stretching beyond the limits, the boxes and the boundaries that we came to accept, or at least I did, as normal. Um, and when we think about considering these boundary breaking ideals that is queerness, it also taps into the stereotypes and the beliefs that's normalized. So my queerness, like I said, is linked to the personal. So to me, queerness is also about resistance and it's also about solidarity. And just being in the space with you and sharing with everyone that's with us, I feel that expansion. And then yeah, there's more, but I think I'd like to have a conversation with you also when it comes to self-definition, like self-love, and then just love itself. Because to me, love encompasses energy, right? Energy for me it's not compressed in this one box and it's not linked to genitals. Because when we think about love, it's often about that an attraction as well. So love to me encompasses energy and it's masculine and it's feminine, and like you say, it's ever changing. It's not just one static ideal, masculine and feminine shape shifting, and to me that's what queerness is about. Just that shape shifting and allowing yourself to be free, to be everything that you can be and more beyond what you ever imagined. So, and also when we envision the rainbow, it's this blurring the spectrum of colors, but it's unified, but you can stand alone as well. So to me, that's what it's about. And all of these truths that we've absorbed into our being, just breaking free from it. So it's about freeness, being as you are and coming as you are, and all of us just coming as we are, being as we are, but then also going beyond what we could ever imagine. But the love aspect is, I think, when I think about queerness, I think of myself, my self definition, but then also love for myself, but then love for others as well. So I've always had this, I've had this, it was troublesome to me, from like, I think my teen years, thinking about love being attached to this notion of genitals, like solely, and these dated ways of thinking around reproduction, because even that, I'm going deeper now. When you think about queerness, you think about mothering, you think about parenting, there's also those boxes and limits. So we can speak about that, but I'll leave it there for now.
So I think for me, I've been in doing, like, I've been organizing for a long time now. But more particularly organizing within feminist and queer spaces has been eye-opening for me, and I'm constantly learning. And like, I can relate to what Andisa was saying about how queerness allows like evolution and change and shape-shifting and morphing, right? And queerness in and of itself for me is that resistance. It is resisting this thing that says I need to identify as only one thing, or I need to move in only one way, or I need to associate or assimilate in only like binary terms, you know. And I feel like queerness is not, and I agree with you, you know, queerness for me is not only about the sexuality or the sensuality or gendered identity. It's also for me how I experience and how I think about my colored identity, and how queer that experience is within our context. It's also how I think about the ways in which we organize, or I organize, you know, being part of a queer occupation kind of artivist project where we occupied a mansion in Camps Bay, you know. How the fuck dare we even think of doing something like that, right? But like, even that experience is queer. The politic is queer, you know. And so I think that queerness is able to hold us in ways that other kinds of politics that we understand are not necessarily able to hold us. And that for me is resistance. And that for me is also equally revolutionary. I think we should just check in again with Tulomanko and Rumana, who's also panelists this evening with us. Conversationalists this evening. Are they with us? Are we there? Have you heard anything?
Romana is not here.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Ons kap maar in. So before we continue with the conversation, I think, like Andiswa mentioned, there is a screening of the Phefumla Queer Collective. What can we just like give a brief about?
So in short, it's PQC. So that's what we call it in short. And it's a new thing that we just started with Triangle Project, and it's only been a year, and we've also been trying to define it and find ways to make sure it is what we think it is, but also it exists and it's there and it does not fall in maybe years to come, and it's there. And I think many of them we've been able, you know, when people are there, so it's basically a space for young activists and artists, and that are doing amazing work, that just join together and just have, and be themselves, you know, and just breathe. So that's why it's called Phefumla. Phefumla in English is breathe. So we do not want to say breathe queer collective. So we wanted to actually claim the word as well, because it speaks to us mostly. So it's also, but also not very, not saying it's not for anyone can take it. That's what I want to say, you know. So it can also be Phefumla for you, because everyone needs to breathe identity. So it's a space for specifically young queers, feminists, you name it, activists, artists, anyone that wants a space to breathe. And that's why how they've also been defining it as well. That when they go there, they know they're able to breathe just by seeing each other. They breathe, and it's been that space meant to fight, to continue just showing up and fighting and just moving through the violence, also being able to speak of our problems we face daily through arts as well. So we call it activism. So we call it. But yeah, so it's just being able to show up and not just, you know, marching to somewhere, having placards and singing, but also telling stories, you know, doing amazing artwork, doing poetry, singing. They love singing. So it's just them being themselves, you know. It's a space for just, as I said, everyone to just breathe. And we also have not had yet one thing that explains it as well because it's new. So we're also allowing it to define itself. Also, people that are in it, that are affected by or that are close to it, can define it as well. So it's not our thing, but it's everyone's thing that is there. So it's a space for everyone to come into and own it and just be themselves. Yeah.
Right, thank you. So we're gonna screen. We'll do the screening, and then we'll be able to come back and maybe reflect on the screening, and then continue to kind of be in conversation about the topic.
Just the description, describing the response, stating as you were describing.
The sound is very bad.
What China does is we advocate for the rights of LGBTI, and we do activism around the LGBTI issues. That's our main focus. And what we're trying to achieve is to have the LGBTI community's voices heard in different platforms, in policy making, in communities, and everywhere where we see the voices of LGBTI is not being heard.
I identify as queer. My pronouns are he and him.
I am proudly queer.
I am a 17-year-old pansexual body. I already knew, but I had feelings for guys.
I'm sorry. I was born with these feelings. I'm sorry. My own gender attracts me. I'm sorry. I'm attracted to both genders. I'm sorry. I changed my body. I'm so sorry. I am who I am. Their body is not. I couldn't be the person, the community, the society.
sorry, mama. Hey, I'm sorry, mama. Hey, I'm sorry. Yes, Kissy, I'm sorry, mama. Yes, Kissy, I'm sorry, mama. Hey, I'm sorry, mama. Hey, I'm sorry. So basically, with this program that we are doing today is we have different groups at Triangle. We have Triangle Safe Spaces, where the safe spaces they work around. They come from different communities, so they identify issues that are happening in their communities around the LGBTI community, and like in their large community. So a safe space, its mandate is to assist the LGBTI within the larger community.
Then um, I got in touch with Full Triangle Project. I invite on Alex, and then this is where I met these amazing souls that are just like me, queer, gay, pansexual, lesbian, everything. So up and then I jail like I'm not because like they open, you can tell them everything, they will never judge you. I feel like this is a safe spot for me.
I find freedom when I'm surrounded by queer people. I find freedom in other people's houses who are more accepting of the fact that I am queer. Or I find freedom where I know that no one knows I'm queer, so no one's going to treat me like I am different.
And also like there are those people who are being sidelined by family, by the siblings, by the institutions like churches. They're being sidelined because of sexuality. And we create a safe space for them to come and vent out, to talk, and in those spaces, then there's a decision making. What can we what can we do to support? That's when we start campaigns, and that's when we mobilize the community, and that's when you're right. We want to infiltrate policies, so that's when we do that.
process of not being accepted in my family, but also as time goes on, they realized that that is my life and it will never change.
High school, then I found a lot of pressure because like I saw like the guys as means they were making fun of abantu that are and abantu abagay.
The reaction that I got from home was a bit sour, compared to like my other friends, because I think I had friends who are like who came from much more privileged homes, so it was quite easy for them to have these conversations with their parents. So when I found out that I'm attracted to women, I never spoke about it, and I would always like hide my partners from my parents and make it seem as if they're just my friends. So when I finally came out to my mom, her reaction like wasn't great. She was unpleased and she had a lot of questions. And obviously, like she became physical because like she tried every way to like get rid of this thing of mine, or this demon of mine. So with this particular group now, it's the Triangle Youth. So Triangle Youth is, we took young people from different high schools in the Western Cape. So what we're trying to teach them at Triangle is activism through arts. So we say that it's best now that within our communities we develop a production where all these social ills around the LGBTI community can be addressed in a way that Abantu can have communications, and we're doing theater work. So the theater work is to take theater outside the theater building and take it to the streets, to the taxi rank, as a form of a way of making people have access to the information.
Art is education. Art is something that is broader than what you see. Art gives a message more than what you see. Art is it's also an education system to educate people that being a drag queen, by being a drag queen, a lot of people gain information that they didn't know before about that. Because I'm the first drag queen from my community.
I think art helps me to express myself and my struggles, and it comes from like my perspective. So I'm able to like bring across a message without being filtered and without being told, okay, don't be too extreme when you're sending off this message. You know, it like there's no restriction when it comes to art. Art heals me. Like it's a space like where like I feel the freedom that I don't feel in other spaces.
So I would say art was always there for me when no one was in my corner, when my family was the only support system that I had. Art was there for me.
And most important about it is this: we are doing it in June. It was part of June 16, and this is the Youth Month. But now, what does it mean for Youth 2020? You know, what are the struggles for Youth 2020? This year, so much happened that affected the young people. There was COVID-19, coronavirus pandemic that affected the world, everyone in the world, and young people couldn't go to school, right? They couldn't go to school, and in many ways, some of them felt very silenced, right? Because their constitutional rights were taken away from them because of this pandemic. Many of them they were classes done on social media, they were classes done online. Many of them they come from poor backgrounds. Their parents they don't have money to give them data so that they can access their education. So they felt so those who have so you could have seen the inequality gap. And so as much as it was a world pandemic, but educationally most of them fell behind.
COVID-19 affects my studies very badly. I'm doing a foreign language, which is German. I'm studying Dutch. And it's not easy to study Dutch online. And it's not easy for me to continue studying the foreign language. And also, coming from a background of uneducated family, it's not easy for my family to understand the current situation that I'm going through of having hardships with my studies and also adjusting to the new learning system of online learning. So sometimes they would make noise, not understanding that I'm going through frustrations of not grasping the information by my own self at my own time.
I am by myself. I have to study by myself. There is like access to like online learning, but then like I am not familiar with that. So I can't say that it helps me in a way because like individuals can feel it. Okay, if I understand it, let me go check the internet. If the internet I explain it actually what I just give up. So it's the academics, is so much pressure that I even thought of like okay, let me just forget about Loniak. COVID-19 impacted his studies in a negative way.
It made me realize like the inequalities that exist like in South Africa or in the world in general. And it has made me lose more and more hope in government. Corrective rape won't change me. Homophobia hurts. DJ. Corrective rape won't change me.
Can everybody hear us? Are we audible? Our video's not working. Perfect. Okay, so that was the short film from Phefumla Queer Collective. Wow, you guys are doing amazing things in Karija. Can you maybe just talk us through what inspired that film? When was it made?
It was made around the COVID-19. So it was around, I think it was around June. I'm not sure, but at the beginning of, at the beginning of level, was it level? I don't know, but just it's recent because it was the only time we were able to meet again after lockdown. So it was just after lockdown, not soon after, but just after lockdown, when after everyone was locked inside their homes and people could not create anything, could not speak to each other as well, could not even speak to their families as well, because also this space is also for them to be able to speak, just speak per day. So most of them, or some of them, can't even speak to their family members. They don't speak to their parents as well. They don't have friends. So that space for them is to share more than it is to create. But it's also a space that covers them as well. So it's just around about that time where everyone was just starting to come out of their comfort zone and see people as well. So it was during that time. And that's what inspired it actually. It was not home at home, but now they're home. So it was around that time.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. There are quite a few themes that come out, right? The theme around violence, the theme around being a young person, being queer, being from the Cape Flats and areas like the Cape Flats on the periphery, and still daring to organize, still daring to be in community, What struck me about that film and what I would like to kind of unpack here is this idea of, I mean, there's many things that struck me. The first thing was this idea of art, and art is a tool for protest, but also art is a tool for activism and resistance, right? So maybe Monique, how do you use art in your organizing and in your resistance that allows you to be able to kind of push forward whatever feminist and queer agenda you push through your work?
So art for me, like that was also mentioned in the document, it's a space for freeness and the creativity that allows you to just imagine something different to your reality at the time. But then also art creates a space for reclamation. Like for me, when I am creating and when I'm in the mode of just flowing, free flowing, whatever form of art that may be, but for me it's usually visual arts and using my body. I can speak about that, but so using creativity and art as a tool for resistance, but then also for freeness, and then to explore the notion of creating a space first by looking at yourself, a physical space, and then using that to connect with others, to convey messages that you have to keep trapped within yourself. And these messages that we can't express or even have conversations about because you feel alone. So those messages conveying it. And then I think it's also it's connected to a whole bunch of politics. So people are afraid to speak about politics and not necessarily know how to say it out, in words, but when you're creating and you're using art, that can touch people because, like I say, a picture is like 1,000 words, So unpacking and then also leave that up into interpretation and around that have conversations. But for me, it's a tool of resistance and then it's also a tool of exploration and connecting. Most importantly, connecting. Yes, there's another part. There's a part in the docu where everyone was in black bags. And I think I can relate to that because you were so othered, you're so marginalized, and you feel trapped, and like you pushed to the margins of society, and you also looked at as garbage, So the reclamation through the artwork is also very important.
I think that very scene that you're talking about also makes me reflect on the ways in which we understand organizing, right? I mean, we come from a very rich history and a very rich culture of organizing and resistance and movement building and feminism within our context and also in the region and beyond, right? But the black bag for me represented all of those things, but it also made me think about like the ways we understand organizing.
Yes.
That's quite institutionalized, or that's quite like there's a particular way to organize. So when you were saying instead of protesting looking other than placards and a march, but actually protesting taking the form of art and artistic expression, that then also becomes a form of resistance. And I see that a lot in the ways in which young queer feminists and like up and coming, for the lack of a better fucking word, feminists that are entering this space and that are claiming space that uses alternative kind of tools for resistance and organizing, So you also mentioned artivism. How do you understand artivism? Like what is artivism? Because I kind of feel like artivism is also this queer thing. It's another queer thing in terms of it not being clearly defined and everything and anything and everything in between, So how do you understand artivism?
I think it's just another tool of being able to express yourself. Or just being able to speak of the things that are eating you up or the violence that you're going through each and every day, but not just maybe crying it out loud or just swearing at someone, drawing up a memorandum, or just, going to march into parliament, for example. So you're just taking that part. Because also when we always march, people are expecting us to march as well. Thinking of, we know TPV, they're going to march to parliament, they're going to do this. But so artism to me means not doing what's expected, but also doing something about it. So it means showing up and doing something, but also not something that will also leave you very, and I'm not saying this because when we come out of protest, we are very tired and exhausted, but also art could also fill you in, like fill you up as well. So you're not just emptying yourself, but you're also gaining something out of it. So people are watching you doing something, and maybe sometimes they even watch you and feel like, oh, they interpret it some other way, but maybe they could relate. You could touch different people with just one story that speaks one thing, but each and every person could find something that means one thing to them.
Yeah.
So you could actually maybe create a song, and people could find that song and it could mean a million things to them, instead of you just holding a placard and saying, fuck, I don't know, whoever, patriarchy, capitalism,
Everyone.
yeah, and then people feeling like, oh, okay, as much as they would also want to say fuck capitalism, they maybe feel, oh, okay, I don't know what capitalism is, but maybe they do know, but it's the language as well, the barriers that it comes with, so they don't want to say now fuck capitalism because they don't maybe know who they're swearing at. But also they maybe could sing Asinama, that's a song, and it's fucking up capitalism because it's speaking about how we're working, we don't have money, and how expecting us to show up to work, to feed our families, to keep on spending so much money we don't have any. It's a song, and many people sing it, and they sing for different reasons. So I'm saying for me, it's just finding different ways of expressing yourself and not just emptying yourself as much as we do as activists. Because also, and I think this is why we also burn out, because we just constantly, just finding ways. I'm not saying words are not powerful, but also we can miss each other with words sometimes. And this is why people create poetry to explain those words. Because poetry is not one thing. Poetry could speak of capitalism and compare it to a class, maybe. And it could be a sexy thing that you could also say fuck, and maybe you want to fuck it because now it's something so sexy, because it's poetry. So that's what art does for me. It takes something and changes it in many different forms, and it also touches even a 3-year-old child who also sing the same song. Unlike the things that we do with also when we speak of institutionalized organizing, that only speaks to individuals or certain people. So that kind of art for me says, even a 3-year-old child could teach that song and they could forever, and it could mean a lot to them. Maybe 10 years later, they know what it means to them. They'll be able to define it for them, instead of just teaching them one word, feminism. Even if that child would not be playing with dolls, a girl child was maybe interested in fixing the gate, might not even understand what feminism is, but that's feminism right there, But also if you teach them songs, to create something out of what they're saying, I think that's what it means to me. So it starts and it lives forever.
Yeah. So I think what comes, like the connection, right, is this element of love that you bring in, and this element of the body that you bring in. And that would have been one of my questions, right? Also, just to acknowledge, for example, Tulomanko that is not in the space because they are experiencing technical difficulties. But my God, we know this human being and we know their activism. And part of the activism, or part of the many movements they've been very influential in leading is, for example, the Fees Must Fall movement, and here using the body, right, as a form of resistance and as a tool for resistance. And then again, also they use their body in the Stellenbosch, Josie to Stellenbosch, which they're currently facing court cases for. Today, they were in court. So I'm not sure whether that impacts their ability to like be part of the space and technical difficulties. Long story short, the body, right? So the ways in which we understand our activism and our work, and the amount of trauma that we put our bodies through. If I have to reflect on my own kind of organizing currently and previously or in the past, being part of the We See You movement, occupying that mansion, was literally us putting our bodies on the line, our psyches on the line, our spirits on the line. And the amount of violence that came from the public, the amount of violence that we knew that would come from the system, the amount of violence that we experienced internally within that space. And then also just if I reflect honestly and deeply about, for example, my journey with QFFF and other feminist and queer spaces, the body is really a site for pushing yourself to its limits, right? So your activism is almost judged by how much you can hemorrhage, but then still fucking stay on that battlefield and fight, you know? And like no sleep, and you don't eat, and it's just inches and coffee, and that's your fuel, and you cut in, you know? And that in itself, I think, feeds into this idea of love. And how do we as young queer feminists building and adding, let me not say building, let me say strengthening the foundation of our movements that are already there and that have been built before us and that we continue to build upon. How do we challenge that idea of giving of ourselves through our bodies, you know? Because like that's just fucked up, man. We shouldn't have to be burnt out, you know?
So this whole idea of burning ourselves out.
Sorry, technical difficulties. We do work from home, and this is the reality that there's a truck passing by now.
So going back to activism and also what it means in this day and age, and the association with queerness. So when we're thinking about activism and we're thinking about healing, we're thinking about not doing things in the traditional way. For example, you know, when we think of protesting, it's always been associated with violence, with this militancy that you're describing, the whole idea of having to drain yourself, push yourself, break yourself down as a sign of strength. Now, activism is about breaking that down and then building on the values of love, I think. Building on the values of self-love and then loving others. And doing so in a way that is collaborative, that brings us together, where we can stand in solidarity. That's the face of what activism looks like now. And putting our bodies on the line, nowadays, it's not just like physically, we do so much online. And, you know, with the whole 2020, with all COVID, all this pandemic, we see that it can still be powerful. We can still touch. And it's about emotions. It's about touching people and breaking down these barriers that we've built up, this hardness that we've had to embrace as strength. And carry this armor that I felt for years is like, it infiltrates into my being as like the toxic masculinity that was directed at me. I had to also like shoot out and direct that to others as a form of protest. But then I realized, look, it took so much breaking down of me personally, my personal space, to realize that I need to build myself up. And in that process of building myself, healing, that transformation, that reclamation of yourself, that love, you get to take hands with others. Because also with protesting in a traditional way, it's like you have to be this machine and you have to push and do it alone. And taking hands with others isn't really an option because it's about how much you can push yourself. You know what I mean? So activism brings people together. It's also about healing inwardly and then reaching out, connecting through our art, through our bodies even, but taking hands with others, connecting with others. And when others are reading, or I say reading, but I mean also feeling what we're creating, that's when, you know, the true effect holistically is, like that's the difference between traditional protest that is usually very violent and with activism that it's something that flickers within, it's like a spark within you and that gets to touch others. So when it comes to our bodies, it's not necessarily breaking it down, but building it up and building with others as well to create more movements.
What does movement building mean for you as a young queer feminist?
I think, well, I'm not saying anything actually, but now that you're asking, I'm not sure what it means, but I understand movement and building in as in two separate things. But also I do understand that you have to create something for you to be able to move. And I understand that movements it requires a constant building That's why it's called a movement, because it plans to move. So I think for me, it just means not just, waking up and doing something and then not, I'm not saying not necessarily just baby it, but also continue, strengthening it, as you said, so that it moves, it's able to move. Continue polishing it, continue. And I think it also starts for me because I'm organizing in many spaces, but also with mostly young people. And what I found out was it is not even that they just join movements and 2 years later they're not part of anymore because they lost interest or they do not know what was going on. But sometimes they know, but because we also, want to teach them a way of moving within this movement that we're trying to build. And I know it's also, movement has to have a certain way to move, or whatever you're building has to have a certain way that it can move. But it's also, I think for us, how I do it in my space, I make sure, because most people don't even know the terms that we use, for instance, nowadays. So they don't know what we can speak politics, and you are right, the political is personal, but also people don't even understand how personal it is sometimes. And working with young people mostly, and I'm talking of grade 8s and 9s and 10s, they still find themselves. Some just, broke up with his or her girlfriend, whatever happened. So they're going through a lot. So for you to come out and say, join this movement, and this is what I'm trying to tell you, this is what I'm trying to show you, and I want you to keep it moving, it's also a lot. So it requires continuous education, and it requires unpacking of that education as well. What does it look like? What does it look like to them? Speaking of something that they could relate to. So instead of you speaking of how you know it, but also how do they know it, and taking that as how they would maybe drive that thing because that's how they know it, and trusting that they can do it, but also being there, not letting go because now you're saying, okay, because you're very young and I can see you can do it, so drive it out because it's bound to fall. So I think it has to do with education, and it has to do with patience as well, because we are very impatient. I am very impatient at times because sometimes I really just can't understand some things as well, because I'm young as well, and I'm sitting here speaking of young people, but I'm young, so I should be saying us, but now I'm saying young, because, because I'm still up grade 8, but even though I'm not grade 8, but I'm very young, and also I maybe need you to teach me how to build something and make it move, and I think it's also the unlearning has to take place as well, and the learning, also the giving and receiving as well. So sometimes you just want to give, you want to tell people, you want to dictate people, you want to tell them how to move, you want to tell them how you want. You actually have a vision, and then you bring something to them, and you tell them how to move, and you tell them, this is what I want as Uzina, and if it does not move like this, then it's not where I want it to go. But a movement involves many different people. That's why it is a movement. It should be able to move with different parts of us, and we should allow different brains and different people to be able to move it and trust the process as well, because it's a process, And I think being involved with many movements as well, and people just being violent in this space as well, and you are just sitting there and feeling like it's gonna collapse because now I'm tired and I want to move this thing with you, but you're not allowing me to, because maybe you're old or experienced or so now you know what you want, but now you're telling me how to do what you want, and now I can't do it, but you can't tell me in a way that I understand or take my way and show me how to use my way and make what you want me to move. So we so focused on this thing, or one thing I would say, our building, I don't think it's not very open, it's not evolving, it's not accepted as well of people as well. It's just looking at one goal and just trying to reach there, and how I reach there might just mean individuals are going to be burned out as well, or individuals are going to fall out, or people are just going to be very exhausted that you don't even want to talk about it anymore, and you're going to come now and blame people and say, oh, but I was looking forward, I was trusting you to do this, but you do not allow them, because trusting someone means allowing them to do it, and then saying, okay, can we do it this way, but also with your way as well. So there's an exchange that should happen, but mostly there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen, because education needs to keep moving as well, and yeah.
Ooh, the wisdom though.
I think so.
Yeah. So like what you saying brings up for me is and it's a common thread, right? Even just thinking about this whole thing holistically, there's a common theme around healing, and there's a common theme around healing linked to unlearning, right? So if I think about it, an organization, for example, a building, a family, a group of, like a thing that's made up of many different people, right? An organization or a family is not a family outside of each and every individual that makes that thing up. And part of what you were sharing around the violence, you know, and the ways in which we move as activists and the ways we are taught to move as activists is quite violent, right? And there's an innate patriarchy, or there's an innate only masculine, like an imbalance of a one thing and not a gentleness or a loving part, right? And I'm not equating the gentle and the loving with feminine, like a feminine aspect. But I'm just, you know, trying to distinguish the difference, you know, the duality. And I think that if we think about the ways in which as young organizers and young activists, the barriers that we encounter, you know, and you mentioned old, which is quite a contentious word. But you know, this interfacing between a younger generation and the older generation. And then what does that co-create, and I love this word, what is like that co-creation? How do we both like play in the sand and both create these sand pies together that like has a shared shape, you know? And not just saying, here's the mold for the sand pie, you take the sand like this and put it into that exact mold. And the reason why I'm giving you the mold is because I don't trust your capacity, or I have my own stuff around trust that I struggle to let go of, or like hand things over, you know? And I think what becomes very apparent is the same way that organizations or movements are made up of individuals, those individuals come with things. We come with trauma, we come with pasts, we come with experiences and perceptions and toxicities and beauties and talents and all of these different things, right? And we don't have a way currently of being able to rethink or reshape the way we move together collectively. And you mentioned collaboration, which it's difficult to collaborate if you haven't cleared that shit up or unlearned that shit or be prepared to unlearn it.
I think you have a very important point there, because perhaps it just starts with something as simple as intergenerational open dialogue conversations like we have here. To connect with each other as people first. So yes, there's a level of respect. I get it with you know, the older generation. They expect the youth, especially, to respect them, and often the youth is referred to as the lost generation. But I don't agree with that. But what I'm saying is we need to create more understanding. This will perhaps go off track a bit, but when we're talking about organizations, we're talking about structures, we're talking about we're talking about toxicities that comes with traditional thinking and being. It just brought back a memory when you were speaking. So I was involved in this program, but it was aimed at girls, education, and personal, just like protecting your body type of program, because I can't give the name of it right now. But so I remember it was specifically for girls, and it was a group of, I think it was grade 9s and grade 10s all together. So they were different ages, but that was the youngest. Grade 8s and 9s and 10s and 11s, something like that together. But in any case, it wasn't inclusive. So when we're thinking about unlearning, we need to sit together, older, younger generation, and get to a point of understanding, because what that space done was, it was aimed at only one identity. And so this was so sad, because I'm replaying it in my mind now. and I'm going to share it with you. So I'm in the space and we creating, there's music, there's poetry, and I'm just speaking not as a teacher, even though I was a teacher in that capacity. I was facilitating conversations, and I was speaking. I was using language that everyone can relate to because it was basically Mitchell's playing, and I'm using slang, and it's just free. The space is open. We can be ourselves. But then there was a moment where we were, you have silences in between also when you're absorbing and you're reflecting. And at that moment when that was happening, someone that identifies as a girl who was forced to be with the boys was jumping. I don't know if you know how the government schools look, but the windows are very, very high up. And this was a short person jumping up, literally hanging on the window sill part, trying to look in and wanting to be a part of the space. And my heart just broke because I realized that unlearning has to happen, especially in places where programs are set. And it comes from an older generation that doesn't understand queerness, freeness, doesn't understand what unlearning involves, and doesn't understand how personal it is, So we really need to create more spaces, more conversations. And I think it is up to us outside of the institutions, like you have in the community spaces that are safe, where more freeness can happen, more conversations can happen, more connecting can happen. Because when we have these programs in schools or in other spaces that are funded by government, it's a problem because it comes with a certain set of rules. Like I told you, like I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget that moment because if it were up to me, I would have included anyone that identifies as anything, to come and just share space and feel that there's a space to be heard. There's a space to just express and breathe, because we need more of those spaces desperately. But the more structured and rigid it is, that's not queerness. You know what I mean? That's not freeness. So we need to think about that. And it is important for us to drive these movements of change, these movements of connecting. It's the only way. Like I always say, revolution to me now, it's entangled with love, real love fusion, So it's not about protesting, fighting in the militant way, but it's actually the complete opposite. And that's what queerness really encompasses.
That's interesting. Because you say re-love evolution. Re-love evolution.
Yes, there we go. That's the one.
Yeah, and like that resonates because it's like, have you guys ever heard of the human revolution? Right? And it's about, it's the same concept as a social or like a broader revolution that's external from oneself, but it's also about evolving and revolutionizing self in that process, right? Because like these need for structures in the ways that we organize, one, sure, it gives us a framework in which to operate and understand, but that thing also limits, and the one thing that it also makes me think of, this memory that you shared, is the ways that institutions, particularly for young people, whether it be schools, whether it be the family, whether it be young professionals working in wherever they are working in, the ways in which that those institutions continue to kind of limit and box and operate in very siloed ways. So you work on health and I work on land, but me and you, we don't talk. But fundamentally, health and land is fucking connected, right? Exactly. And so how, the question I want to pose then for us to maybe just reflect a little bit on is, what are the creative strategies that we can think through, that we can pilot or play with, through our organizing, that allows us to begin to push those boundaries and reimagine that things. What do you think, Chris?
I think it takes a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of dismantling, but also a lot of losing yourself as well in what you know that we are not willing to do as people. So we want to hold on to things that we know so much that we don't want to even learn new things as well. And I think that's also why we are not even open to speak of what you're actually saying right now, of land and a general like conversation. Because really, where are you going to put hospitals if you don't have land, you know? And people are also thinking of, and it makes sense, because maybe a doctor might be thinking, but I can't lose my job because the hospital is already here, you know? But what if there are many people out here? So what if many people are dying and then more hospitals are needed and more doctors are needed? So nobody wants to think it that way. But because now I'm here now and I want to secure my work, and I want to also, it's bread and it's money, you know, and capital for stuff as well. So I can now think of land that I'm needing, you know, because now we want to start my work that I'm doing. So we're so focused on what we know that we don't even think of what we might, or what you don't know, how that might benefit us as well. Because I think also really our struggles, they intersect as well. And the moment we don't want to focus on that as well, it messes everything up. Because now I can't have an honest conversation with you. Because I think now I'm a doctor and you're speaking of land, therefore it's those are two different things, you know. I've got you know, whatever I need and I'm okay, I'm secured. But you don't think of what might happen if that building might just burn down or might be bought by somebody else. And you might have to not have a job right now, and a new hospital might be built somewhere else, and you're not going to have a conversation as well. So I think people should just, and it's hard, that's why I say, I'm saying it takes a lot of dismantling as well. And it's not just on who's listening, but also on you as well. So who's saying what. So whenever I'm approaching you with how or what I think, it might also take a lot from me. It takes a lot from me as well to be able to say, I think this should go ABC, when you know it's supposed to go Z by, you know, or YZ, you know. And as not being able to meet each other at one point also messes things up as well, because nobody's willing to say, okay, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to come here, but also come here. People are always waiting for us to go to them. So if I want to tell something, I should go to you. And the moment I don't go to you, don't come to me as well. And it's also, I understand that as well, because you don't think there's something we should know. So how am I going to go to someone if I don't think there's something I'm missing? So I'm not going to come. Hence I'm saying that I'm conflicted as well. But I just know, just by you asking, I just feel it's a lot. It's really a lot. And it takes, I don't know, I really don't know. But it just takes a lot of, as I said, unlearning. And I think that's where we should all start. Just unlearn what we know, all of us, regardless of the age that you're in. Because I also think that's why there are these barriers, or, you know, this missing exchange of knowledge between the old generation and us. It's not only because they can't hear us, but also people are just not, it's a lot. As I'm saying right now. And it's a lot by me just thinking about it as well. And if I were asked to think of it, I'd sleep. For that day, I'd go to sleep and I'd sleep on it and wake up tomorrow and maybe we can conversate. Just maybe, you know. And but also that holds something, because each moment, also that's challenging as well, but it's realistic that each moment that we're not saying anything, we're missing something or a chance. So we're missing a chance to be fixing whatever, or to be, or someone just learning something new because you don't want to say anything, but also because you're tired. And that's also, I think that's why we're also pushing ourselves constantly. That's why we just, you know, showing up as tired, as sleepy as you are. You're just going to wake up and go teach people. Because you know you might be missing someone who was willing to listen that day, and you don't want to miss a chance. And it's exhausting, but it needs to happen like that. And it's sad. It's really sad, but it's also freeing when you taught someone something and someone is listening, and you're able to also take something from them as well. And I always say, even, you know, in class, there were always people, I was part of the people that would not even say anything. You know, when you ask, what is 1 + 1? I would not get my head up, you know, and I'd sit, I know 1 + 1 is, but I would not say what it is. So there are always those people, if you say, Zina, what is 1 + 1? And then they'd say it. But also if you say in class, what is 1 + 1? Nobody's going to say it. I'm not going to be the first one to say what 1 + 1 is, you know? So I think it's also that, and I don't know, but also people that don't say much always have much to say. That's also what I've learned. And I think we always go with those who have much to say, and we're just missing everyone that's around them. There's a lot to say, or that we have a lot to learn from. Because I'm listening to this person that will always, you know, is upfront and was always chosen for any speech, who always knows what to say. But there's always someone, that one person is always behind them who knows exactly what to say and might know exactly what to say to actually change how I feel or what I think about what that person is saying. You know, as I said, I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm tapping into what both of you said, but I think it has to do, the key to unlock this whole new way of moving forward would be reimagining. So how do we reimagine? Yes, it seems like this broad term, but just think about pre-1994. No one could, maybe you had a desire, you thought something else could happen, but post-1994, we live in proof of reimagining society. So reimagining the way forward would be important, but also connecting. So I think there's importance around this notion of we don't live single issue lives. So queerness isn't just isolated on its own. Racism isn't just isolated on its own. Being differently abled isn't just isolated on its own. So it's constantly, folding into each other. There's this intersectionality that's happening. And the moment we realize that, look, all of these oppressions, all these different isms are connected, then we can start moving together, building together. But when we still see these separate, rigid, black and white boxes and lines, that will keep us from reimagining things. So to me, the answer lies in that, somewhere in there.
Do you know how?
Like I said, at first, to me, it feels like we need to first connect as people and understand, though we are different, there are things that bring us together. And those things that bring us together is what we need to hold on to for these movements of evolution, of revolution to happen. So it starts with just being human, being together, being people, speaking, having conversations like we have now, and that's possible for anyone to do. That's how we start breaking down this armor that we've almost had to embrace as, a part of us, but it's not actually a part of us. It's all of those forms of protection we've had to learn to wear. But if we're in a safe space, we can lay that down and just be vulnerable. Vulnerability is important because that's where all of those, that's the operations, it's like the portals, that we need to create. And the portals that we need to create is through understanding, but also first just through speaking. And from that, we can start to build, we can start to move, shape shift even more, and create this new way of seeing things, because it is about seeing things. When I think about the backlash, I'm thinking about the protests, I'm thinking about the occupation that, you experience and, being in the mansion and everything. I think about the backlash of people and not understanding that they see one thing, right? But what is it connected to? What is it rooted in? What bigger movement is it connected to? It's not just, it wasn't just about occupying that mansion, and then also getting the backlash based on being queer, based on gender,
Based on class.
All of that. But you see, all of that is connected to something
Absolutely.
else. It's not, you can't just look at it as one thing in isolation. And I think the moment we start doing more of that, start being more reflective and start making connections, we will see that we are actually all connected. So it's about amplifying those connections and then moving with it.
Yeah.
Okay, now I want to ask, so that's very interesting. So how do we teach people connection? Is it something we teach, or is it something that people come with? Because I might understand connection differently. So maybe for me, it might mean being able to be connected with my phone or being able to touch you, connection is also different. So now how do we teach people? Because also we've been trying to have this conversation of intersectionality, trying to tell people how these struggles intersect and how I am not just a woman, I am Black, and at it, I am queer as well. And, there's a lot that I come with. So don't just see me as Andy. So I come with a lot and I cannot be anything else besides that. So I can't just be one thing, I am everything that I am and I go with it. And I also understand the privileges that some of the things that I am might come with as well. And I understand something that we might be the same, but the privileges also that Uzina might come with when it comes to me and wrestling in the same line, because that's intersectionality as well. So how do we then speak that connection into understanding our existence, or just waking people up? And because we've been trying to have the conversation as well, this conversation on intersectionality and connection, and trying to tell people or show people how it, making different examples as well. But people would find people would understand, would speak mostly on when we speak of patriarchy and feminism. So people would maybe not want to get, but feminism is mostly men.
Yeah.
But the same very Black men would get what not a white person speaking on their behalf is. Because now it's a race thing. Now it speaks not to them. So now they can say something. But when they come into our space and speak for us, we can't say now, don't speak for us. Because now, we're being too emotional. But it is emotional. You can't, as men, come into a woman's place and then speak for them. But when we speak of whiteness and Blackness, now white people can't come into a Black space and speak for them. Now they understand it better. So how do we, because you might also make that example to them and say, it's not different, class, everything, it is the same and it hits the same. And the same way being Black is emotional to you, is the same way being a woman is emotional to me. So I can't speak any happy about it when you are treating me less of that, or you are violating me as well. So I can't respond in a very, happy manner, but you're saying something I don't like, So how do we, speak that connection, or just, I don't know, because I also think connection is a part of us doesn't understand connection, just a part of us. And this is why we're able to sit like this and have different conversations, and we're not same people as well, but be able to understand each other. There's a connection. Yeah. So, and this connection is only links a few of us, and it's only the marginalized as well. So it's also those who are affected mostly by it that are able to connect. So if you're able to cry with people, you're only able to connect with them. But if you're able to laugh with people, you can't really understand why they're crying. So how do we? That's what I'm interested in, because that's the most thing that I'm struggling with, even in my own safe space. Being able to just wake people up and say the thing that we are feeling, I'm also feeling, but just differently. And this is where we should be meeting at, but we are not, because now you want me to laugh when you want to laugh, and now I'm crying and you don't understand. And it's okay, but how do I say, I don't know.
Connection isn't easy, and reimagining the future isn't easy, but so connecting has to do with something that is difficult for people to come with and stand for: vulnerability, and then also compassion. So that's where those are the two things and more, but two things I want to focus on that makes connection possible. Being vulnerable, and that's not easy. We know that's not easy. And then also being compassionate. And we see these safe spaces, these queer safe spaces, are spaces of compassion. And that's why you're able to be yourself. So that needs to be somehow transferred into all other spaces. Because we need more compassion. And if 2020 taught us anything, I'm sure compassion is one thing that many people can now understand at a deeper level.
And resilience.
But resilience is another thing, resilience, and when we're talking about strength, we mustn't forget the softness also, So yeah.
I just am noting time. So should we take questions? We also do have an amazing performance by an artist called Amy Brown, who's dope as fuck. Oh my God, I'm so glad that they've agreed to share space and like offer their muchness and their sexiness and their talent with us. Yeah. So maybe let's take some questions. We've also been chatting, yeah. Yeah. Are there questions?
No questions here.
Okay. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
So we have a question from Linda Primrose.
Okay. Hey, Linda. Is Linda on
Hey
mute?
guys,
Hi.
by the way, my name is and what I would like to understand is the isolation of bisexual and how can
Linda,
as,
would you
as
mind speaking a bit louder?
hello? Hello?
Linda, we never heard you.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
It's not a question exactly, but some it's kind of a question. Most cases our flag, like the LGBTI, we have an issue about the bisexual. How can we work with them as and to include them to everything that we do, artistically, in community, and everything? Because from my point of view, I have come across with a lesbian that she's bisexual, and they'll end up dissing her sexual. So how can we have that what you call it? How can you educate people about creativity, sexuality, the flag, and the views and ideas?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. We really struggled to hear you. We all like huddled around the speaker. Okay, so did you hear? Did you hear? Okay. So what I think I heard, and please maybe Linda, if you can just put it in your question in the chat box, that could be helpful. But what I think I heard was around you occupy or you organize in a particular space, like a safe space, and there are bisexual human beings in that space, and they're currently struggling to be connected to the work. They're currently struggling, or you guys as organizers are struggling to connect them with the work. And when I say them, I mean bisexual beings. I'm a bisexual, queer. I mean, these labels, but you know what I mean, man. So you specifically say bisexual, and how do we include them in the flag you mentioned, and just in general in the work that you do? Please, if you can confirm that this is the correct question you're asking, please just give us a thumbs up or put it in the chat box. But I think if maybe we can move with that, I can maybe start. So even within the spaces, for example, that I've occupied, and these are feminist spaces and these are queer spaces, but the bisexual experience and the bisexual identity and the bisexual way of moving and living and breathing and being is very often queer, and it reminds me very much of like a colored experience. And when I say that, it's like there's this draad sitting, man. You're sitting on the fence. You're not there, you're not here, so you must choose, And sitting on the fence is not really acceptable, because you have to actually choose what you want to be, even in a feminist or queer space, and that's fucky, And so I get that resonates with me personally, and I think it's just really about how you reach that kind of constituents or those kinds of human beings that are within your space is the same way you would reach a lesbian or a gay individual or a trans human being or an intersex human being. And this is what queerness and queer politic, or when we say queer, that's what that offers us, right? Is a tool and a way of working and engaging and co-creating and connecting and all of these things. It offers us a commonality so that we don't need to constantly ascribe to the LGBTQIA plus P everything, you know. I'm not sure that answers the question. Does anyone else have an offering?
I want to speak a bit about the flag and bisexuality. A lot of people don't know this, but the purple and the pink is representative of the bisexuality. And like you were saying, look, that in between state of neither here or there, you know, being bisexual, that's also something that we shouldn't be afraid of, and we shouldn't think that if you're either lesbian or gay, or you know, you embrace these labels, that the in-between isn't okay. Why isn't it okay? You know, so that fluidity, because like you were even saying, when we think about even our activism, we think about our queerness, it's constantly, it's like these waves, you know, it flows, it comes back, it crashes, it takes different forms. So yeah, that connection and just understanding that the blurred lines is okay.
Yes, it's that fluidity. And that's also why queerness and queer politic, or just like what we bring when we positively claim queerness and not a one or another thing. That's what's so disruptive about that.
Exactly.
Because it's actually really disruptive, you know, because it challenges and it shakes notions or ways of operating, ways of moving, ways of engaging that we're not used to. And that's just. Any other questions? No other questions?
Are there comments here?
Are there comments or anything? I mean, we have help. No?
No.
Nothing. Where do we see our amazing, fluid, shape-shifting? I love that. Shape-shifting. It sounds so futuristic. And I mean, like, that's quite right. Because that's potentially a tool or a way of thinking about, like, how to dismantle, how to unlearn, you know? So where do we see as, like, ourselves as young queer feminist organizers that are organizing in very different ways, but are organizing, you know, where do we see the movement, our communities, our work, our politics, where do we see that 5 years from now?
So 5 years from now, I hope that these safe spaces that we're organizing, that is limited and exclusive to a certain degree, becomes more integrated. So we're not like hiding in corners, having these conversations only with ourselves. I'm hoping in 5 years' time, love can lead the way and more of these safe spaces can be infiltrated into broader conversations. Like I said, because all of our experiences of oppressions, of marginalization, it's connected to other things. So I'm hoping that there's going to be less isolation and more connection. That's what I'm hoping in 5 years. That at least when it comes to the movement, the queer movement, it's also integrated into other spaces, and we can move together as, you know, people. We can move together and start to break down not just one thing, but more things at a time, so that we can all just be free. That's what I'm hoping in 5 years' time, that it won't be working in isolation anymore, and there'll be more connection.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah, I think I also see a change that looks like that, you know, a change that is free, but also is there to stay. because many things change, but they also change. And I think also I see a change that is allowing of people, that is accepting of who they are as well, and with the work that we do, I see growth and continuation of education, a never stopping way of educating people. And also a very open way of educating people. And I see a lot of unlearning. I still see that. That's what I feel we strongly need to do as people. So I see that a lot, but also I see people mostly showing up, man, being themselves. And I also see us working together, with the younger generation and with the older generation as well. But also I see a change in the use of language as well, being able to speak of things that people can relate to. I usually say this to my sister that it's okay if she's younger than me. She's always the one who fixes the kid at home. She does not like cooking as well. And I always say to her, it's okay if you don't want to identify as a feminist yet, but that's feminism right there, She sees herself as an engineer. She want to fix cars. She's not interested in, and my mother also thinks like that, but my mother always says, I'm not a feminist. But it's okay, because I also think it's language, and language is not for us to own. So that's also what I see. And let go of language, because we treat language so godly that it has to be the way that language says things should be. But language should change with time, because people change as well. So we should be able to define things differently as yes, because it's language. It's not supposed to be there forever. Why feminism should not be feminism for 100 years that speaks the same thing to everyone, because we're different. That's why we've got different names. So our feminism can never be the same. It's never the same. So I think, so I think
the names, that is so fucking powerful,
So I see that kind of change that is very allowing, that is very flexible, it's fluid, that is just, that does not take ownership, that does not own things, that is free, man. I think it's where we're messing up. We just want to own things. We want to hold onto this glass because it's yours. Hey, it's a glass, babes. You can drink it up, but it's a glass, Anyone can hold it because it's a glass. And just they won't even break it, because they understand the importance of it. They understand that it's a glass, That's what I hope to see in 5 years from here. And then hopefully it's very short to actually unsee a lot that we've seen. I mean, I'm 23 and I've seen a lot in 3 years, and I can expect myself to be 28 and say different thing, It raises a lot. So I see a lot of unlearning with those years, and I just hope to see in, 23 years, a better view of everything that is happening, less violent, even with our spaces as well. There's so much violence that we even inflict on each other, even our safe spaces are unsafe and as safe as we hope they are. So I also see even our safe spaces as safe, so that people that are outside could come and say, this is what I want to learn, this is what I want to see, this is what I want to know. How do you do it? How do we love each other this much? And we love each other. Queer people love each other. There's so much love. But also, there can be so much violence within that, violence within that kind of love. But I see a lot of unlearning. That's what I see.
That was so poetic. I kind of, You guys have me shook without words, but I'll try and answer my own question. That thing around time, 5 years being a very short space of time, they say that you can only manage or measure a business's, you can only measure change within a business over the course of 5 years. Equally, in a human being, the first 5 years are the most formative years. And I think there's something very spiritual, and there's something very valuable in that, in terms of the time, right? And so for me, in 5 years, I can't necessarily say I would only want to see our work or my work in a particular place. I also want to see myself in a particular place. And so, number one, this level of dismantling and unlearning and forgiving and healing of self and the internalized patriarchy and the internalized ways that we understand our work and the internalized ways we understand how we must move in our work. That's where I want to be for the actual work. Informalized, uninstitutionalized, fucking radical, broad-based, cross-sectoral, cross-struggle change and like collaboration and coupling all the feelings, you know, like you dealing with gender, you dealing with medicine, then your hospital beds, I want the land, like where does this happen? You know? That's what I hope I'm using in 3-5 years. Practically how that works, that's another existential crisis and conversation for another day. If there isn't any other questions, are there any comments before we...
Does being willing to die for freedom mean having to put ourselves in physical danger and emotional strain? It doesn't make sense to kill ourselves while fighting for life. Cleaning a park. Okay, I think that part.
Yeah.
Cleaning a park and working together, neighborhood working together can be an organized healing action for the land and for the community. A party or event catered for Black queer bodies and women where we can wear our bodies as ourselves and be enjoyed together can be validating resistance. Really special conversation that you are bringing to the space. Thank you. And thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
Who is that?
Quentin Manning.
Quentin Manning, we name you and we see you. We see you. That is absolutely 5-year vision. Like chills. Even now, like thank you so much for that offering into the space. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. Yes, we are 100% behind that movement. Thank you for that offering. If there aren't any more questions or comments, then I think like let Amy Brown take us home. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for making time and space. We feel you, even though COVID tells us we should be separate. Thank you for sharing space with us, and we hope that you tune in tomorrow again.
Namaste, beautiful people. Much love to the Queer Feminist Film Festival for inviting me, and much love to you for the support. Now, when you call love, do you mean all love? Do you mean pure love? Do you mean all of the above, or do you mean your love? You think it's physical or clinical or biblical, but I think it's spiritual. You're a girl, I'm here for the lovers among us. I'm here for the others among us, those who were smothered but refused to stay under the covers. Mama, I'm here for the haters, for the naysayers, for the debaters, for the I experimented with gayness, for ally status. I say, Frey, whoever makes you stay, sis. I'm here for the misogynist, the apologist, for the modern twist on the wobble bits, more bothered with which hollow orifice I'm gonna swallow with. I'm here for the deviants. Nothing you have ever seen on TV before, queen on queen, steaminess, but really, if you're screening this, what I really list is that you go out and experience really bliss, put the free up in your freakiness, because love is more than a theory passed down. Query God's brown. I'm so excited to be sharing some of the music that I'm doing on this unreleased project of mine called Beautiful. This track is dedicated to the late Stace Dash. You, from my point of view, you're so beautiful. You, from my point of view, you're so beautiful. Oh, so beautiful. Life is what you make of it, so take the risk. Don't let your greatness slip. A new day brings grace with it, so come and take your place in it. Life is what you make of it, so take the risk. Don't let your greatness slip. A new day brings grace with it, so come and take your place in it. You're so beautiful. Don't you let the pressure get to you, 'cause you're so beautiful. And when you're close to giving up and you feel the pressure building up, never be afraid to hit me up, 'cause I am always here to give you love. When you feel you're close to giving up and you can feel the pressure building up, never be afraid to hit me up, 'cause I am always here to give you love. Your love, my love, our love, it's all love. Your love, my love, your love, it's all love, one love. This track is called and it was written in the past for a future muse. You don't have to say too much, 'cause we can get straight to touching. My loving, if you want it, you can have it. Don't need no language, and you don't have to say too much, 'cause we can get straight to touching. My loving, if you want it, you can have it. Don't need no language. Don't waste words and don't waste verbs or nouns, just make sounds. Lay down, fold up, full cups were emptied in a frenzy. Plenty of deep breath, squeeze flesh, the sheets wet. Queen, let me get a sip of your sweetness. I wanna you till you're speechless. I know that you're the talkative type, raucous, but quite sure that there's much more that you'll explore in this life, and plus your portion is right. So dish me up a little bit of that delightfulness. Yes, you make me trip. And you won't have to say too, 'cause we can get it straight to touching. My loving, if you want it, you can have it. Don't need no language. She said, but I understand it perfectly. Somehow it seems this girl is fucking up my circuitry, and certainly it seems the curls and curves will turn me into some kind of girlish fiend in this romance. We don't need no vocab, we just need to slow dance. I just want to hold hands if you don't have no plans. I'd like to hold you tight with both hands and double tap that, because I like this. We're quite lit, we might just require some silence. Your highness has got me in a mind twist. And yes, the convo is the nicest, but naturally I prefer to hear you purring while you're on your back for me. And you don't have to say it too much, 'cause we can get it straight to touching. 'Cause my love, if you want it, you can have it. You don't need no language. Thanks.